Welcome to the deep dive. We sift through, stacks of sources, articles, research notes, really boiling it down to the essential insights for you. And today we're plunging into the truly extraordinary life and mind of a figure everyone knows, basically synonymous with genius, Albert Einstein.
Right. And our goal here for this deep dive is really to pull out the most important bits of knowledge, the key insights. Think of it as a shortcut to being genuinely well-informed about this man. His name means brilliance, sure, but his story, it holds some surprising depths way beyond just the equations.
Exactly. Even if you think you know the name, maybe the hair, the famous equation, there are incredible details. Things like his early struggles, his huge impact not just on science but on global events too. Stuff you might not expect at all. Okay, let's unpack this. So let's begin right at the start of his journey. Albert Einstein was born March 14th, 1879 in Ulm. That was in the Kingdom of Württemberg, part of German Empire then. His father, Hermann, he was an engineer, and his mother, Pauline, was a pianist. Quite talented, apparently. They were a Jewish family. Though it's interesting, he later became non-religious.
And even from a really young age, he showed this intense interest in math and science. I mean, the story goes he was already tackling advanced mathematics by the time he was just 9 years old.
Yeah, but here's something fascinating and maybe surprising. His struggles with traditional schooling. He apparently didn't do well with the very strict teaching methods back then. How does that, challenge our usual ideas about what genius looks like in school?
It really does, doesn't it? It kind of suggests that sometimes creativity can really flourish outside those really rigid structures, maybe when someone has to figure things out their own way rather than just being told how to do it. But despite those early bumps, he did go on to study at the Swiss Federal Polytechnic School in Zurich, a top institution. And he graduated in 1900, got his diploma in mathematics and physics.
Okay, so he graduates from this prestigious school. You'd think, a brilliant mind like Einstein, he'd just walk straight into a top university job, right? But surprisingly, his path took a bit of an unexpected detour.
That's true. He actually had quite a hard time finding a teaching position right after graduation. It took a while. It wasn't until 1902, a couple years later, that he landed a job at the Swiss Patent Office in Bern.
And this is where the story gets really interesting, I think. Because it was during his free time at the patent office, outside his actual day job reviewing inventions, that's when he quietly hammered out some of his most revolutionary theories in physics. Just think about that for a second. These huge breakthroughs happening sort of in the margins while doing a pretty bureaucratic job. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? Like, what amazing ideas are people working on right now in their own free time outside their main gigs?
It's incredible, yeah, sitting there evaluating other people's inventions, and meanwhile, he's rethinking the entire universe, because it was right there among all those patent applications that the seeds for his miracle year really started to sprout.
Right, the Annus Mirabilis, Latin for miracle year, that was 1905. This single year where Einstein published 4 groundbreaking papers that just, well, they changed physics forever.
What's fascinating here is just the sheer scale of it, the impact from one person in 12 months. So first, there was his work on the photoelectric effect. This basically explained that light can behave like particles, what we now call photons. And it's important to note, this specific work is what actually won him the Nobel Prize in Physics later in 1921, not relativity initially.
Interesting. Okay, so that was one. What else came out in 1905?
Well, then came the special theory of relativity. This is the one that proposed that time and space aren't fixed absolute things. They're actually relative to how an observer is moving. And this is where he introduced that iconic equation, E equals mass times the speed of light squared, showing this really deep link between energy and matter.
E, MC theory later.
Yeah.
Probably the most famous equation ever.
Probably is, yeah. And then finally, his third major contribution that year was his work on Brownian motion. This paper provided really strong, definitive proof for the existence of atoms and molecules. You have to remember, even in 1905, the idea of atoms wasn't universally accepted. It was still debated. So this was huge validation. To do all of that, photoelectric effects, special relativity, and proving atoms exist all in 1 year, it's just astonishing, really.
Absolutely mind-blowing. So special relativity redefined space and time relative to motion. But then he took it even further, right?
Yeah.
How did he bring gravity into this new picture? That led to his general theory of relativity about 10 years later, 1915.
Exactly. Yeah, the general theory of relativity was the next monumental step. It expanded on his earlier work by incorporating gravity, but not as a force like Newton thought of it. Einstein described gravity as a curvature, a warping in the actual fabric of space and time itself. The core idea is that massive objects, think stars, planets, they actually bend this space-time fabric around them, and that curvature is what we experience, what we perceive as gravity.
And the predictive power of this theory was just incredible. He predicted things like black holes, gravitational waves, stuff that sounded like science fiction back then, things we couldn't even dream of detecting for decades.
Absolutely. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the moment this really hit the world stage, the big validation, came in 1919. There was a solar eclipse, and observations made during that eclipse by Sir Arthur Eddington's team, they precisely confirmed Einstein's predictions about starlight bending around the sun. That confirmation, that proof, is really what catapulted Einstein into global fame. Almost overnight, he became this huge international celebrity, a household name.
Wow. So obviously his life wasn't just contained within physics labs or, theoretical calculations. It was profoundly shaped by world events too, and his own strong ethical beliefs. In 1933, with the Nazis rising to power in Germany, he had to flee. Being Jewish, he was a target. He moved to America.
That's right. He settled in the United States, took up a position at the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, New Jersey, and he eventually became a U.S. citizen in 1940.
Now, his role regarding World War II, and specifically the atomic bomb, that's definitely a complex part of his story. He was fundamentally a pacifist, deeply committed to peace. But he had this overriding fear. He was terrified that Nazi Germany might develop a nuclear bomb first.
And it was that fear, precisely that fear, that led him, along with other concerned scientists like Leo Szilard, to sign a letter. They sent it to President Franklin D. Roosevelt in 1939, basically urging the U.S. government to start its own atomic research program. But it's really crucial to emphasize this. He himself did not work on the Manhattan Project, the actual project that built the bomb. He wasn't involved in the development.
Right. And later in life, he expressed pretty significant regret about having signed that initial letter.
Yeah.
He became a very strong, very vocal advocate for nuclear disarmament and global peace efforts after the war, used his fame for that cause.
Yeah, his influence definitely went beyond just relativity. He also made huge contributions to quantum theory, the physics of the very small. Even though, ironically, he had some deep philosophical doubts about parts of it, especially its probabilistic nature. That's where his famous quote comes from. God does not play dice with the universe. It really shows his unease with the idea of fundamental randomness in physics. It kind of captures that philosophical tension, right, between a clockwork, deterministic universe and one with inherent chance.
Yeah, that's a great point. And he didn't stop trying to find a deeper theory either. He spent many of his later years working on what he called a unified field theory, trying to combine gravity and electromagnetism into a single, elegant framework. He never quite got there, though.
No, that quest remained unfinished. But what's also fascinating is how he used his immense public platform. This raises an important question. What is the responsibility of a famous scientist, a public intellectual? Einstein didn't just stick to physics. He frequently wrote and spoke out about philosophy, peace, civil rights, human freedom. He really engaged with the big issues of his time.
Absolutely. And by all accounts, his personality was just as compelling as his intellect. People describe him as having this, childlike curiosity, but also really sharp wit, a good sense of humor, and despite the fame, a genuine humility.
He really championed imagination and creativity. Independent thinking was key for him. There's that other famous quote of his, "Imagination is more important than knowledge," which is quite a statement from arguably the most knowledgeable person of his time.
It really is. And beyond say, he left us with other gems too, didn't he? Things like, life is like riding a bicycle. To keep your balance, you must keep moving. Simple, but profound. And that timeless advice. The important thing is not to stop questioning. Always be curious.
His legacy is just, well, it's immeasurable, really. His theories aren't just historical footnotes. They are the bedrock of so much modern science and technology. Think about space travel, GPS systems in our phones, lasers, understanding quantum mechanics. It all connects back to Einstein's work in fundamental ways. He's rightly seen as one of the greatest minds, maybe the greatest mind in human history. His name is literally shorthand for genius, and for very, very good reason.
So moving towards the end of his life, Albert Einstein's final chapter came on April 18, 1955. He died in Princeton, New Jersey.
Yeah, the cause of death was internal bleeding. An abdominal aortic aneurysm had ruptured.
And there's that poignant story about him refusing surgery. He reportedly said, "I want to go when I want. It is tasteless to prolong life artificially," accepting the inevitable.
Right, and then there's that slightly controversial detail that often comes up. After his death, his brain was removed and preserved for scientific study. Apparently, this was done without his family's explicit prior permission. It remains a point of discussion, that tension between scientific curiosity and personal wishes.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've journeyed from his unconventional early schooling, where he didn't quite fit the mold, all the way through his revolutionary theories that literally reshaped how we see the universe. And we've touched on his profound impact, not just on science, but on ethics, on global events, on the human condition itself. So what does this all mean for you, listening?
Well, I think Einstein's journey really highlights a few key things. The incredible power of independent thought, first off. Don't just accept things, question them. Also, how scientific genius doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's deeply intertwined with ethical considerations with the world around us. And maybe most importantly, the enduring relevance of asking those big, fundamental questions. His knowledge became truly valuable because it was understood, it was applied, and it helped us see the world differently.
So let's leave you with this. Considering Einstein's own belief that imagination is more important than knowledge, especially now in a world just flooded with readily available information, how does that challenge your approach to learning, to problem solving? And maybe, what questions does his incredible complex life story spark in you about that delicate balance between genius, ethics, responsibility, and ultimately, personal choice? Lots to think about. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Please subscribe.